what the end of the story is. Okay, here's the beginning of the story.
Okay.
There's a spa, and it's been in the news a little bit, but it's a very small, traditional Korean women-only spa in Seattle.
Okay.
And this spa has women, and they come in and they do a bathhouse thing, and it's women only. So what do you think happened next in Seattle?
Welcome to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And let me ask you a quick question. Have you heard of Reynolds versus the United States, or Prince versus Massachusetts, or Brewell versus Hobby Lobby? What about the Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado? I bet you've heard of at least one of them. Maybe not the first two, because they all happened and a little bit earlier than most of us have been here. So probably haven't heard about those two as much. However, I'm sure if you've been in anywhere around politics or anywhere around our societal just conversations and things that are happening, you have absolutely heard of at least one of those cases, or a case where there were a defendant that felt as though their personal rights or their religious rights or any of their personal rights to them were being infringed upon. So what do all these cases have in common outside of the fact that they are definitely something that has been in the public eye at some point? It's the fact that each of them does involve the individual rights versus societal norms. So today's kitchen table topic, we're going to be discussing this very topic. We're going to go deep into what is it like when you have to defend your freedoms, your personal freedoms, particularly when it comes to some of these big cases and larger cases. In the case of Reynolds versus the United States in 1878, the Supreme Court ruled that not all religious practices are protected under the law, and that they can conflict with societal norms, specifically addressing polygamy at that time. But then you have Prince versus Massachusetts. This case upheld the state's authority to regulate child welfare over parental religious rights. So as you keep going, we all heard of the case in Colorado where we had the court side with the baker who refused to make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. All of these cases are right now cases that can be thrown in one particular category. Each of these cases are led to interesting debates that cross all backgrounds, ethnicity, gender, and political affiliation. So what's really going on? What's really going on is what I am asking myself. And like always, I am bringing you on my journey. And the journey starts today. So come along with me. And we're going to start by interviewing a new friend of mine who can answer a lot of my questions, as well as some that you may have as well. His name is Mark Matta, and he is Director of Ministry Relations with the Pacific Justice Institute. And PJI is a dedicated nonprofit that dedicates their life towards legal defense, and their legal defense organization. They specialize in protecting religious freedom, parental rights, and through their tireless effort, PJI provides essential legal support to individuals and families at no cost, empowering them to defend their rights in a challenging legal landscape. So Mark has been with us. You probably heard him a little bit in the background. So he has been with us. He has heard my intro, and now we want to welcome him to the show. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Janelle. It's great to be with you and to be heading toward the preservation of our God-given liberty together. And the good news is that the direction of things this day, and with an early Christmas present that we got on November the 5th, that it looks like there's going to be significant legal and judicial progress toward that goal of preserving our God-given liberties.
Wow, well, that's exciting, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. But first, can we tell the people what what is Pacific Justice Institute as it relates to why was it started, and just give us a little bit of background on this organization because many haven't heard of it.
Well, I appreciate you asking that question. Very simply, Pacific Justice Institute was founded 27 years ago. So I think that would have been 1987. I'm sorry, 1997. But the idea is that people at the local level need help, as you said, as you listed perfectly, in defense of religious liberty, parental rights, sanctity of human life, healthcare freedom, and then even true asylum cases where people have come to this country. And for example, in the case of Judeo-Christian people who have come to this country, say on a visa, when their visa is going to expire, they would go back and submit themselves to the authorities, and they would prepare to leave the country. And if they're going back from America to an at-risk nation like Libya or Algeria, they could be at serious risk of death or imprisonment. So we will take those cases, those true asylum cases, to protect and keep people here so that they're not killed or jailed or harmed. But the mission, very simply, is defending these things. And I can tell you a few distinctives. I will give you a quick history on our founder and president, Brad Dacus. Brad Dacus is, and you got to meet Brad just, I can't believe it, a couple months ago in beautiful Atlanta. But Brad has been a friend of mine for over 20 years, been doing this for 27 plus years. And Brad served as the legislative assistant to the U.S. Senator Phil Gramm, received his Juris Doctor, the law degree from University of Texas School of Law. And Brad coordinated religious freedom and parental rights cases for Rutherford for 5 years prior to founding Pacific Justice Institute in 1997. The reason that Pacific Justice Institute was founded, by the way, the website is PJI for PacificJusticeInstitute.org or PacificJustice.org. Either one works. But there's a ton of free resources there that we'll talk, we'll unpack, that are totally free as we have this conversation. But the big things for Brad were many of the legal firms that do great work, and we've worked with all of them. You can think of Christian legal firms that and they do great work. They tend to focus on the Supreme Court level, on the federal appellate level. So they're looking for the higher level cases. Excuse me. We tend to focus on is the local cases. So say it's someone whose religious liberty to freely share Christ on the street corner is being infringed, or parental rights where parents are being told, because they've posted something on social media that indicates Christian faith, that they're at risk. And we've actually had cases like this where parents had been told that a Child Protective Services or other entity was going to come and remove children from the home because they viewed a Christian faith perspective as being restrictive, that is, not allowing LGBT thought in the home. Basically, they said that the home, the legal terms they use are neglectful and abusive homes. So when we hear about this type of threat in advance, we can come and we can basically protect the family and protect the children from being removed from the home. And it's not just in blue states now, if you will. There are cases that we've handled for the crisis pregnancy centers that have a pro-life perspective, where they were required, for example, in California, to promote Planned Parenthood. They were required when a woman came in with an unplanned pregnancy and she's stressed out and wondering what the options are, and they were required to present information to tell, here's how you go to get an abortion. And so PJI has taken cases like that and basically removed that requirement so that a crisis pregnancy center does not have to promote Planned Parenthood or abortion. And then, of course, healthcare freedom, where people have been told you must have a certain medical procedure or you could lose your job, you'd be at risk. And particularly with the vax, it's not an anti-vax or a pro-vax perspective, but it's saying that people need to have their they need to have their own conscience and their longstanding belief, and particularly Judeo-Christian conscience must be honored. And so we've handled several cases where people were told, if you don't get the vax, you're going to be fired. One of the most extreme cases, and I'm trying to think of where this was. I think it was like a University of Michigan Medical Center. Don't quote me on that. That's from the memory bank.
Okay.
But they had a case where organ recipients. So these are people they're getting themselves in shape. They need a liver or a kidney, or they need some kind of an organ, and they're on the recipient list, and a tissue type has been found, and they're told by the hospital center that they have to have a COVID vax in order to receive the organ. And they say, the people in these cases have said, we've personally done the research, and that when people receive a COVID vax, they have a higher rejection rate on their transplant. So we do not want to receive the vaccine. And the hospital system said, you have to get the vax, or we're taking you off the recipient list for someone who has, say, a decreasing kidney function and a dire need for a transplant. That's a medical death sentence. So these type of cases we have taken to defend and say these people have the right to receive an organ without being an organ donation, to receive that without being compelled to take a vax or another medical treatment with which they're not comfortable. So all these kinds of things, but working on the local level to help people is Brad's heart. But by the way, we work with all these other organizations that are doing the higher level cases, and Brad has argued up to the Supreme Court. I'll give you that story in a minute, but it's remarkable. But the focus is helping the normal man and woman on the street.
Got it. So addressing the common man with these issues. And it's important that you do that, because oftentimes when I see, particularly when I look on social media, it's the common person that's just trying to battle this, right? And the moms and dads that feel hopeless and helpless in these situations. What would you say is the most pressing civil liberties issue that you're seeing today?
Well, there's several things that are hot, but I would say there's a lot of stuff happening related to the LGBT stuff that's happening. I'll give you an example, and I will allow you to finish the story, because not only are you very smart, but you're very informed, and so you'll be able to tell me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies, that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help, real hope, true compassion, friendship, and discipleship, and yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs31:8@att.net. This is the Church's Moment.
Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion.
What the end of the story is. Okay, here's the beginning of the story.
Okay.
There's a spa, and it's been in the news a little bit, but it's a very small, traditional Korean women-only spa in Seattle.
Okay.
And this spa has women, and they come in and they do a bathhouse thing, and it's women only. So what do you think happened next in Seattle?
Gender discrimination.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. You
I
had a
just say,
man, a biological man, and what we call an AMAB, assigned male at birth, and he said, "I'm a coming in," and the owner said, "No, you're not." And then he took his case to I believe it's called equal access or equal employment. It's one of the state organizations in Washington, so they have virtually limitless funding. And so
mm,
this amazing couple in Seattle area, they have two locations for this women only Korean spa. They said there are basically two options that they have. One is to allow a person who is a biological male assigned at birth and to come in there, and that their business would be over. People can check that out if they want to search it on the web. It's called Olympus Spa, and we appreciate your prayer
mm,
for that case because it has
yeah.
advanced to the Ninth Circuit. But the there, he said we would have two options. One is to allow the man to come in and our business is over, and the second option would be to fight against this equal access, limitless attorney fund. Basically, their own taxes from the state of Washington are paying to attack the liberty that this small business has to operate freely as God has directed. So, I mean, the guy was very interesting because I won't say the names, but he was so precious. He's just on the phone and getting emotional and saying, "I am so thankful to God for Pacific Justice freely standing in front of me and taking this case all the way to the Ninth Circuit." So, by the way, this is a prayer point too, if you want to pray for Olympus Spa. But the 2 out of 3 judges on the panel will say, you know what? It is not the same thing to say we must allow a biological male into a women's safe space. That is not the same thing as saying we need to allow, you know, any diverse person to like join our organization or whatever.
Right.
That's not what this
Totally
is. This is
different.
women's safe spaces and
Yeah.
protecting our women. So
I mean, what's concerning about that is, will we ever have a women's only space? I mean, if you allow this to continue or this to pass and they support it and now they destroy this business, destroy the concept. I mean, now we have to ask ourselves, now it almost feels like there's a back door for men to come into any space where we feel comfortable as women. And that's been the bulk of the argument, I'm assuming.
yeah, it's quite remarkable when you look at some of the data and how far afield we've come. I always try to make a plug too for people to have an action and activist mindset. You know, I'll just throw out a number here. This is the number to the Capitol switchboard. And if people memorize it, it's great, because if something comes to your attention and you say, I would like to let my voice be heard, if you just have the number memorized, it's so easy. The number is 202 area 224-3121, 202-224-3121. If people have that memorized, they just pick up the phone, they call, and they say, the person answers Capitol switchboard, and you say, I'd like to speak with my representative. My particular representative is Ami Berra in California 6th, but or your senators, and you go right there. You can let your voice be heard, but we need to let our voices be heard to say when the legislators are considering what's going to happen with Title IX. And good news on the legal front is that the attempt by the Biden administration to amend Title IX to say that protects women and says women, you know, have sports and women can be involved and participate in all these areas. But the Biden administration was trying to amend that to say that sexual preference is a criteria that is a discrimination type criteria. So they can say a biological male says, today I feel like a female,
Right.
so I'm going to come in to women's locker rooms, women's showers, all the safe spaces.
Yeah.
So that's another thank you, Jesus moment. That's a praise God moment to say, thank you that attempt to amend the Title IX, which was meant to protect women, to then allow men into their safe spaces. That amendment has been basically tabled. So I don't think that's going to go anywhere. But just to have an idea of the magnitude of the problem, is you have 800 plus medals. Now I'm talking about collegiate medals, Olympic medals, other competitions, 800 plus medals and or awards for athletics have gone to to biological men in women's events. So that could be track, that could be weightlifting. We saw 2 of them at the U.S. Olympics. And I would just say, as I know you encourage your viewers and listeners to engage, at Pacific Justice Institute, we have an organization called Church Finds Its Voice. It's a sub ministry, but we work with churches and pastors to help them understand it is not political, but it is biblical that we pray for our leaders. 1 Timothy 2. This is biblical duty toward God's third institution, which is civil government. And pray for our leaders, 1 Timothy 2, elect God-fearing leaders, the ones who best honor biblical and constitutional principles of liberty, and then to occupy till the Lord returns. We need to be active and involved. Some people are acting as poll monitors, some are working on nonpartisan voter guides, some are running.
And we're going to get into the political side. I don't want to jump ahead too much because I want viewers to kind of follow with us. But we're going to definitely get into electing leaders and being involved and why that's necessary and how it kind of correlates to what you're doing. But I want to stay on the cases first because I know there are people that are very, very interested in the work. Is there a particular case that you worked on that stands out to you that you may not have gotten the outcome that you wanted, but it's just something that really impacted you?
I would say this. I personally, my graduate education, I was going to do finance and JD and a law degree. I'm not an attorney. I didn't do the law side, but I've worked with legal people a fair amount. We have had many victories in the healthcare freedom area, and that would be where, and I'll give you an example of some tremendous victories, and then even the victories being upheld. But with the Bay Area Rapid Transit, this is a group out of San Francisco. Most people are aware of it. Runs their trains and their transit authority that radiate out from the city. And they told a group of employees, you must have a vax in order to retain your employment. And so they, in their conscience, they had done their own individual research, and there had been letters of exemption submitted, all in accordance with a proper law and process. And it laid the foundation in case there would be terminations or other negative consequences. The foundation is laid with these documents that clearly evidence people's longstanding conviction. So the Bay Area Rapid Transit chose to ignore that and to fire the people. This is my understanding. But the case went to court with 6 or 7 plaintiffs that Pacific Justice Institute represented. And the outcome was that the wages were restored and damages received. This has actually been in the press, the Bay Area Rapid Transit settlement, so that each of those, I believe 6 plaintiffs received a little over $1 million, which was back pay, and then I believe damages, if I'm reporting this correctly, that went to appeal, and the Bay Area Rapid Transit appealed it, and they lost on appeal. So we're seeing what comes next. But the idea is that anyone, whether it's a government entity or a company that thinks they can be tyrannical and say to someone, you have to do something with your body, or you have to be an experimental person, really a medical experiment, by receiving something that is not well tested and vetted, that people don't have to do that. And the tyrants are put on notice. We have a very high success rate in litigation, 248 cases in active litigation all across the U.S., mainly on the local level, but also, I'm going to say probably 10 times that number that are solved by letter ruling, administrative procedure. One of our attorneys gets on a Zoom call. I'll give you a quick example, but there was a school district in Southern Cal that told a highly qualified Christian credentialed teacher, wonderful woman, great experience, and she went in to apply, and everything was going great with the application. And then they said, you have to sign a document that says, I agree to conceal from the parents any kind of sexual indoctrination activities happening with minors in the classroom. So they were saying, they can cross-dress, they can use different pronouns, we can talk about stuff that parents really need to give permission to talk about. And she said, I will not agree to that. And so they said to her, well, you cannot work here, then you're, if you will, removed from candidacy. So one of our attorneys simply got on with a Zoom call to the district superintendent and their attorney. They had a conversation, and people are learning that Pacific Justice Institute has a very, very high success rate when we litigate. And so the bite is there with the bark. And so they're realizing the simple prayer is that the fear of God would fall on any would-be tyrants that try to compel people against their conscience to conceal something about minor children in the classroom, or healthcare decisions.
So what do you say to people who feel like it's over exaggerated? So there are people that would say, oh, this is not happening in our schools, and we don't need this. And you're talking about all these different cases, but what is your response to them?
Yeah. Well, I would say that, with the 248 cases we have in active litigation, we have 30 staff attorneys, and my hat's off to not only Brad Dacus, our founder, but to the attorneys on staff, because they are working for significantly less than industry would pay, because they love the cause and they want to stand for the protection of people, parental rights, sanctity of life, healthcare freedom, protecting our God-given liberties. We have 248 cases in active litigation, about 10 times that number that are solved annually through arbitration, through letter ruling, through a conversation, and it's a lot of cases, and we have a lot of pro bono attorneys who are affiliate attorneys who help. So when you look at the number of those cases, I would just say this: it's a lot. And if most people are asked, more and more and more people are understanding Pacific Justice Institute is around, what it does, and it's there to help them, and how they can go to the pji.org website. They go to the Get Help link, it drops down, and then it says request legal review within our knitting. So the board of directors requires that we stay within our knitting of religious liberty, parental rights, sanctity of life, healthcare freedom, etc. But there are myriad cases. There's a lot of case stuff going on. And I think that there would be many, many more, 10 times, 100 times more, if people knew of the resource, and that people could access the resource. A friend of mine he serves on the board of another Christian legal organization. They tend to work at the higher levels. And his own daughter, who is, young adult age, late 20s, got married. They had a baby. She worked in healthcare, and she was told, get the vax or you lose your job. She said, but I don't even interface with the public. I'm in a kind of she did nutritional type counseling and putting together dietary plans. Anyway, they said, basically, get the vax or you're going to lose your situation. And she was told basically by another organization, we're not going to defend that, because that will open the floodgates of all these people coming with all these needs, wanting to get exemption letters and stuff. And our founder, Brad Dacus, he said, this is a needful thing. This is a vitally important thing to people, to retain their God-given liberty about medical decision-making. So we took all those cases. I mean, Brad said, we'll open extra phone lines if we have to. We're taking those cases. So to answer your question before, there's a ton of cases just in this area alone. Healthcare freedom, a ton of cases in LGBT, a ton of cases in religious liberty cases where people are being told. I'll give you an example of a case where a pastor went into, people have heard about the drag queen hours. And so they go into the library, and there's like a drag queen indoctrination of young children thing going on, which is horrible. So this pastor from a local church just went in, not to protest, not to make a comment. He just went and sat in the back in the corner to observe and to pray. And there was someone there in that particular drag queen lunch thing, lunch gathering, who said, he's a pastor and he's here to disrupt. It wasn't true. But anyway, they came and they arrested him, So Brad Dacus, our founder, he said, I didn't know that we'd be in the criminal defense business,
right.
But doing that too. And I've got to give you one tremendous victory, really. Again, in all of it, we have to give the glory to God, because it's God who brings forth really good results. But Brad was asked by a group of churches in the Bay Area. This is early in 2021, in the heart of the COVID. And the churches, as everybody remembers, were being restricted. They had restricted attendance, or they were closed entirely. They were told, I believe they were told by the governor of California, you can't worship because supposedly singing, it could have, there could be droplets involved or whatever. Anyway, so churches were basically shut down, and these churches said, 5 or 6 of them said, we want help. Brad Dacus and Pacific Justice Institute took the case to the federal court, then to the federal appellate court, were rejected at both levels to say, can we reopen the church? Costco's open. Many other little establishments are open. Walmart is open. Federal appellate. And if people know, as you know, the Supreme Court, when you go there and ask for an emergency action, that's really a Hail Mary. That is a God, we need your help type moment. And the Supreme Court not only agreed, I mean, the odds are insurmountable. Well, God surmounted those. Nothing is too difficult for God, exceedingly abundantly. But the Supreme Court not only agreed to hear it, but 6-3. This is in February of 2021. 6-3, they voted to reopen the California church. That was like a boulder being dropped in a pond, with the ripple effect all across the country of churches reopening. So it's fighting these types of battles.
So basically, there's so many examples that it's impossible to say that this is not happening on a grand scale, because you're constantly being contacted. And not only that, but you started mentioning a little bit earlier about elected officials, and I want to kind of pivot a little bit to how can we support to a certain degree before going into direct instructions on how people can support. But when it comes to electing the right people, because this is something that I've been talking about a lot on my show, trying to educate everyone. I just did a show on populism, just trying to help educate people on why it's important to know who you are electing. So I know you have a webinar that you all do. I think it's called 10 Effective Ways to Help Elect God-Fearing Leaders. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I would say this, and I think people know this, that there are a million little offenses that lead to tyranny, and people have been feeling them, and sometimes they don't know what that is. So someone is told, at the airport, put your mask on. Now, there's no science behind that. I would always comply because I used to fly a lot, but sometimes I'd wear the mask down around my chin. The medical data is pretty conclusive that the masks, if I can smell perfume or I can smell something good cooking in the kitchen, when I have my mask on, then the much smaller virus particles or viruses are going around it and going through it. So the mask has very limited effectiveness. An N95 mask, more effectiveness than, of course, other masks. If a person has active outbound coughing or sneezing, that could be a help. So we want to acknowledge, the balance. But people need to realize the little offenses that they've felt, being told you have to wear a mask, having someone in Costco run around the mask patrol, put your mask on, this kind of thing. And I would say a kind of a corollary to that is that a silent majority is no majority. I believe from what we've seen and from various polling that you've probably seen and done, and that the majority of people in this country are God-fearing Judeo-Christian people who believe that our rights and liberties are derived from God, and that the Constitution just protects those, but that we need to defend America's biblical foundation, the separation of powers, consent of the governed, the family is the basic unit, and many more. It's distinctly biblical Christian principles, and we could talk about that sometime on a program. But when George Washington was asked, would you be our king, after he won at Yorktown, and the people just knew the monarchy as the form of government, they said, no, man has a sin nature, Jeremiah 17:9, the heart of man is deceitfully wicked. We observe that in history. It's not just a theory, but you look at the kings and queens of Israel and Europe, and what you see is the rights and the liberties of people being eroded and destroyed when you have all those concentrated powers. So the founders said, we need to do something different and separate powers. So they looked they read many documents like Blackstone's commentary on the law and Montesquieu and Locke and different things, but they read the Bible like 4 times as much. But they looked at Isaiah 33:22, one of my favorite verses. It says, "The Lord is our lawgiver, our judge, and our king." Our judge, lawgiver, and king, he shall save us. So right there is the structure for Article 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution: separation of powers, legislative, executive, and judicial. And we need to preserve that. When a leader comes out, I'm going to say this is probably, I'm trying to think of when it was, but they came out and said, there was a president of the United States who said, pretty recently, a couple terms back, but he said 3 terms. He said, I'm going to use my pen and my phone to make law. And every pastor in every pulpit should have jumped up and said, you know what? Executive orders are one thing that affects only the federal branch according to the Constitution, but you have to have a lawful legislative process. If you want to change how immigration policy works, you have to do the hard work of that. Has to go through House and Senate, Senate and House, conference to the president. There's a lawful process, but the separation of powers slows things down. And I would just say this, that to answer your question, because there's so much we could talk about, but the 10 effective ways to help elect God-fearing leaders Zoom training for me flowed from a desire to help Judeo-Christian and conservative people to say, what can I do specifically in my local area to help put in God-fearing leaders, local, state, and federal, and to assure fair elections. When I would watch people who I consider to be greats, like General Flynn, Michael Flynn, I believe is his name, true patriot, paid a great price for standing for truth and justice. And when I see people, and I mean, I'll just say any key leader.
Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies, that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help, real hope, true compassion, friendship, and discipleship. And yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs31:8@att.net. This is the Church's Moment.
But I've seen leaders, and they'll speak and they'll say this, very inspiring speeches. They may give their Christian testimony and they say, America is under attack. Its biblical and constitutional principles and our God-given liberty is under attack. You feel it, I feel it, we know this. Life, marriage, God-given liberty under attack. So we all need to, quote, get involved. We all need to stand up. We all need to take action. We all need to get involved. And I've seen many speakers who will speak in kind of generalities like that. And I say, we need specifics. First of all, I need to be praying for my leaders and nation. Number 2, I need to vote in an informed manner, biblically and constitutionally, at the federal, state, and local level. And we have resources that we can point people to that help them to do that. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Voting biblically, constitutionally. Also, doing voter registration at church. Now, this can be done in any community or any house of faith, nonpartisan voter registration. And we even talk about ways to help the pastor understand, we're not talking politics here. We're talking fulfilling our biblical duty to pray for our leaders and elect God-fearing leaders. So we talk about that process, voter registration. We talk about voter guides, nonpartisan voter guides, like through iVoter Guide, so people can immediately look and see who's conservative, who's moderate, who's leftist, based on their contributions and their endorsement data. It's public data. People being poll monitors, so we can protect Janelle, so we can protect our precious God-given liberties. My wife and I served as poll observers. So we go and we observe and we prepare reports of what we saw. It's not confrontational. It's actually very exciting. We pray as we go. How to support people. Like if you were running for office, Janelle, I'm telling you, not only getting on the phone to help you, but sending contributions to you. There are so many ways to support God-fearing leaders. So in 45 minutes, just 45 minutes total time in a Zoom call format, we can give people 10 different ideas of ways they can use their unique gifting. Very busy people in little cracks of time where they can do these things to really make an impact, to help retain. And for me, we have 4 kids, they're now college age, but we want to retain our America's biblical and constitutional foundation and our God-given liberty for our children, and even propagate that around the world to see other people live free. So that's our heart's desire.
I love that. I love that. 2 things came to my mind, and we'll definitely make sure that there's a link to your webinar, as well as to the website. Everything is going to be in the description box. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just drop down the description box and you'll be able to see everything. That being said, 2 things came to mind. One, the first thing I know some people are thinking is, where's the separation of church and state? And for those of you who watch the show, you're going to find out exactly where that came from, because I've mentioned it before, but that is by no means anything we need to worry about. And it was not a law or a policy or anything of that nature. So that's number one. But number 2, and I personally feel that there is no separation between church and state, because you were dealing with people who have or should have a moral compass, and it should be directed towards God. However, that being said, to your point, when it comes to having people work in campaigns and politics, I love that you're talking about equipping people to go out there and be a part of the support that comes along with politics. Because oftentimes we want our elected officials to be strong believers, but the people who are working the polls, who are watching, who are doing the processing of votes, things of that nature, we need them to have a connection to God as well, have a relationship with God as well. So I love that you're doing that. What are some specific goals as we're wrapping up? I don't want to take too much more of your time. But I do want to touch on what are some goals for Pacific Justice Institute in this new coming year, and what are some ways that people can get involved?
Right. Well, I'm so grateful. I would say this. Number 1 is prayer, and our founder Brad Dacus talks about prayer. Focuses on that a lot. In fact, he will come and speak to a church or other organization free of charge, no honorarium, no love offering needed, and he will bring whatever message people would like to hear. Now, in a civic organization, they might want to hear more about legal cases and legal and judicial progress. In a church, Brad will give a sprinkling of that, but mostly for churches and pastors, he teaches expositionally through God's word, and then he'll even give an invitation to Christ. So he has the heart of an evangelist, and I'll talk about that in a minute as it relates to America's biblical foundation. But he says 2 things very simply. We proclaim the gospel, and we preserve our liberty to freely proclaim the gospel. So there's never any compelled faith perspective, but what we want to do is preserve our God-given liberty. When I used to say to people, I'd say, America has a distinctly biblical Christian foundation. And I would hear people say things like, now you're talking about theocracy again, you're talking about compelled faith perspective. And Janelle, because you've taught on it, but the letter that came to Thomas Jefferson, it said I think it was from the Danbury Baptist about the Congregationalists, and it said, we're afraid there's going to be named a national denomination like the Church of England that would then tyrannically impose its doctrine on the country. And Thomas Jefferson said, no, don't worry about that. There's a high wall that's erected between church and state. In other words, the Christian principles can be here like, and are here like, separation of powers, private property, consent of the governed, etc. The family is the basic brick of society. So those principles will always be cherished and upheld, but there is never a theocracy or a compelled faith perspective. Right. So we have a distinct Christian foundation, and that is that which gives us the most, the highest measure of national greatness. That is individual, religious, economic, and civil liberty flow from the fact that we have separation of powers, private property, consent of the governed, where we choose our own leaders. For Pacific Justice Institute, the way people can help, pray, and people go to the PJI website. There's a thing there that has a press release section, and it's I can send you a link to a 1-minute video summary, so if people want to look and see what's going on. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's a 1-minute summary, but by video. But people can go to the press release, briefs, or that you just look and you see the cases, but where people can just, number one, give God the thanks for this amazing liberty preserving work, mainly on the local level, but also pray about cases that are pending, like Olympus Spa, like I'm trying to think of some other cases. People can contribute financially. We appreciate that. I mean, I say this, we have 36 offices all across the country. We take cases in every state of the nation. And I would say, as a finance major, I love to look at a finance guy, look at overhead. So Brad Dacus, he's the most amazing negotiator for everything. All of our office space is donated, 36 offices. All of our media time on television, radio, internet, podcast, all of it is donated. That means the resource that comes to the ministry is going to go to fund legal cases. So praying, supporting financially, spreading the word, letting people know, pji.org, get help. They can say request legal review. It's all free. Speaking at churches, all free. 10 effective ways to help elect God-fearing leaders, 45-minute Zoom for any group, all free. Church finds its voice. So we're here to serve and preserve our God-given liberty and rights.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for joining us. This will not be the last time. I definitely would love to bring you back and talk more about some specific things. But I appreciate you giving us an overview. And to everyone who's watching, as I stated before, all of his contact information, ways you can support the 45-minute Zoom meeting that allows you to get information on how to elect strong leaders. All of that is in the description box or the caption, wherever you're listening or watching this. Please make sure you check that out. We will definitely have Mark back. Thank you all for tuning in. That concludes this interview. And I want to make sure that you keep in mind that your liberties and your freedoms are yours and you should fight for them. And thank God we have someone in our corner. All right. Until next time, have a